exactly on the hour. It's 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. in Sydney, Australia. Welcome everyone to this first online seminar hosted by the Society for Organic Petrology. My name's Katie. For those who haven't seen me, you've probably been getting all my emails, I hope, and regarding this seminar. So I'm very, very privileged to be able to talk to you today and discuss with you what's our plan for this year, as well as introduce our speaker. So last year sometime, just getting a bit of feedback. If I can ask everyone to just put yourselves on mute, that would be really helpful so we don't get any feedback while myself and Maria are going to be talking. And if you do have any comments or any questions, well, you can just put them in the chat and then Maria will address them after her talk. So back to our TSOP online seminar series. TSOP Council felt it a good idea to host some online seminars. We're starting this seminar series with Maria Mastalerz. I'll introduce Maria in a second. Maria is one of our John Castagno Award recipients. So we've reached out to our award recipients and some of our long-standing members, also established people in the fields in organic petrology to present not only the science aspects of their research, but also how their careers developed over time. And it's so diverse, and I think it's very pertinent to learn about all our career changes, especially given the current situation in the energy sector, specifically where a lot of us find ourselves working. So our intention is after this talk, there will be maybe 3 or 4 more seminars. We'll also be hosting seminars for students or with student speakers. So please look out for these emails and please support them and share these invitations with colleagues and professionals. So now with that, it's an absolute pleasure to introduce our first online seminar speaker. So tonight we have, well, tonight for me, we have Dr. Maria Mastalerz, and Maria's been a senior scientist over 35 years. She doesn't really need an introduction because she's well known to most of us. A lot of us have read lots of her works, but she's had a over 35-year professional experience in the academic environment, with her main expertise focusing on coal geology, organic petrology, and geochemistry of hydrocarbon source rocks. She's also got wide-ranging laboratory-oriented experience. She's developed techniques in electron microprobe and reflectance micro FTIR to study light element composition and functional group distributions in organic matter. And over recent years, her projects are focused on characterization of organic coals for carbon methane potential and the importance of isotopes on organic matter maturation, coal gasification, as well as shale gas. So an extensive focus area for her research aspects. And today, I think her talk was titled My Adventure with Organic Petrology. I think that's still the title. So I'm very excited to hear what Maria has to deliver to us today. So as I said again, please put all microphones on mute if that's possible. And Maria is happy to answer questions at the end. And just so pop them in the chat if you don't want to forget them. Thank you. And over to you, Maria.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. And thank you, TSOP, for invitation to this seminar. And thank you, Katie, for this nice introduction. And I'm so delighted to see that we have 72 people on the call. So I think they must like me. Well, I wasn't really sure what to talk to you about today, because I think that this society and its members over years, they've heard me enough to talk about my research. So then I was thinking perhaps I need to make it less technical, and I title my talk, My Adventure with Organic Petrology. And this is the time that I'm going to share my screen and hope that technology will work with us today. Do you see, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slides.
But that's the note. Can you see
the
both?
notes, we can see both, yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to swap the view.
Excellent.
Is it better now?
Perfect.
Okay, so I probably should say this is, I'm going to give my pointer here. I probably should better say this is my 40 years adventure with organic petrology, because that's how many years it's been. And I am just going to talk about, as I said, not really about my research, but a little bit about everything. So we'll start with my road to organic petrology research. I will say something about organic petrology, something about my research. I will briefly discuss my concerns of the field and future of organic petrology. And I will tell you a little bit about my life outside research. Start from the very beginning. So I was born in Eastern Poland, and Poland is in the center of Europe, for those who are not that familiar. But I was thinking that it would be a good idea to put a little map here, because of this unfortunate situation recently with Ukraine and interest in areas around, I thought that it would be good to put me in geographic context. So this is the eastern boundary of Poland. This is Rzeka Bug, and Poland is here, Belarus is here, and Ukrainian is just south of that. So I was born here in the little village in the very eastern Poland. This is my oldest picture that I have. I'm 3 years old here with my brother Leszek. So when I was born 11 years after the Second World War ended, so these were still post-war years in my country. And there was a lot of problems. People still try to come to terms with the losses of the war. So Poland was still in ruins. Poland lost 6 million people during the war, which is 1/5 of Poland's population that time. And people were generally poor. So conditions were not so easy. So when we were growing up and we were elementary school, my parents have a farm in Eastern Poland here. And it was not a specialized farm, so we had everything on that farm. We had animals, we have crops, we have vegetables, and the work was really on the farm was really hard. So when we were going to elementary school, whole summer vacations were spent helping parents in the farm. And I remember vividly being a 10-year-old and working in the field, helping the parents. I was thinking, this work is so hard, but in addition, it's so repetitive and it's so boring. So at that point, at being 10 years old, I decided I'm not going to work on the farm, but I'm going to be a scientist instead. So I have never changed my mind since that time, and I've never doubted that that's what I need to be, except one moment in my life. And I am going to tell you about that moment a little later. This is just to show, to prove to you that that work on farm in Eastern Poland was really hard. This is my father, and this is me, and this is my mother, and collecting crops during very hot summers, a very hard work. So I knew from the very early, I want to be a scientist. Well, coming back to where I was born, in elementary school, we had to walk to a little town here, which is Terespol. Between this little village and Terespol, it was 7 kilometers. So again, this was post-war years. We didn't have cars, we didn't have buses, we did not have roads. And the winters were really strong, the winters were cold, the winter were snowy. So for little kids to walk from this place to Terespol, that's my school in Terespol, it was quite difficult. But what's more difficult for me was that I could not participate in after-school activities. I wanted to, I was good at sports, I liked the track and field, I was good at speed skating, but I couldn't do that because after school, I had to walk home before it got dark. So I wasn't happy about that. So when I was at the end of elementary school, and I started thinking about high school, where to go to high school. I didn't want to commute for 5 more years this way, not being involved in activity of students after school. I decided that I have to go away from home. So I have to go to a school where I can live in a dorm and I can be close to school and participate in school activities. So I started looking through various high schools that I can go to, remembering that I'm going to be a scientist all the time. So then what caught my eye? A geological high school. Technicum Geologiczne. That sounded scientific to 11-year-old. I didn't know precisely what geology was, but sounded scientific. So I went for it. So I went to geological high school in Kielce in Poland. And this was a beautiful scenery and beautiful place to study geology. This was the area of the Holy Cross Mountains. It's also a beautiful place historically. So in high school for 5 years, I studied various subjects and they made me a geologist. I learned a lot of geology. And after 5 years in that school, I got a diploma of a geologist. So at the age of 18, I was well-qualified geologist. Now, I finished this geological high school in Poland as #1 student. And that time in Poland, there was a rule: when you finish as #1 student, you can choose any university you want and any major you want to study. So here I had a dilemma. So I was thinking, I can choose anything. Where should I go? Maybe I should study medicine. Maybe I should study international trade, thinking about all those famous universities in Poland. And then I thought, well, they didn't sound really scientific, and I wanted to be a scientist. So I thought, well, I already know so much about geology. It's interesting. So I probably should continue to go to university and study geology. And thinking a little bit more seriously that time, I thought, because I have such a good background in geology already, when I go to university, I will have time to kind of get deeper into the subjects that interest me. So I decided to go to Wrocław University in Institute now Geologiczny, Geological Sciences Institute. That was about more than 700 kilometers from my hometown. And Wrocław University, very beautiful place with historic buildings. This is our building on the Oder River. And this is like one of the pictures from my university years. See, so that's my classmates. Some having much fun here, some are in more discussion, involved in some discussion. And this is myself. So that's me and my one of my best friends, Grażyna. So studying at Wrocław University was very good. It was a very good program. We had access to all kinds of rocks, and we during every summer we had field schools of several weeks. And I was thinking that time, it's so much more interesting than working on that farm in Eastern Poland. So I was quite happy with the choice, and finished a university and geology training with distinction. And at that point, they actually, after I finished with master's degree, they offered me a job at Wrocław University as assistant lecturer. The job that they offered me was available because the professor who had that position before, he got a postdoc at Penn State University in the United States, and he left. So the position was open. So I accepted the position. I always wanted to be working at university, so that was for me a good solution. And then I was thinking, what should I study? They suggested, because the professor who left, he was studying maturation of coal, he was working on coal. They suggested to me that perhaps I should kind of continue his line of research. So that all happened in 1981. And in 1981, and that's where I was started thinking, what should I do? When I study coal, when I study organic matter, what kind of direction should I go to? And then I was thinking, well, maybe I should study coal under microscope. That sounded interesting. But there were several problems with that. First of all, to study coal under microscope, it would be nice to have a microscope. Well, at Wrocław University, we didn't have that time microscope that I could study, I could look at coal. We didn't have any facility of that sort. And also there wasn't anybody there who studied organic petrology or organic matter under microscope. So I couldn't really rely on anybody to let me learn something from somebody. So that was a problem. So then I went to the library and I found this book that probably all of you know, and all of you probably have on your desk, Stack's Textbook of Coal Petrology. Well, I opened the book. It had nice photomicrographs, nice pictures, but the book was in English. I didn't speak English at that time. I spoke Russian, but I didn't speak English. So I started working with coal petrology, reading that with a dictionary. Started with a first page 1. With a dictionary, it took me 3 days to go through, to translate 1 page. And I wasn't sure if I really knew what was on that page. So I thought, well, Maria, you have to learn English and you have to learn fast. That cannot work that way. So how do I do that? Well, I signed to some courses in Poland, and and I also try to start writing to some people who work on organic petrology outside Poland. So, you know, in broken English, but I tried. And then, because in the libraries, we didn't have any periodicals on organic petrology, because also nobody was interested in that. So there wasn't any reason to be there. So I kind of thought I have to rely on the papers that people can send me if I correspond with people. But lack of microscope and lack of English was not my only problem. There were other problems that times. We had, that was socialist times in Poland. And after 30 years of of socialist Russia influenced government, they brought Poland to the most terrible conditions. And I wanted to show you some examples. We didn't have anything that time in stores. Nothing was available. This is example of a butchery store, and this is example of a grocery store. Nothing on the shelves, and this is still, there are still vinegar left. And I vividly remember those times. And then in 1981 till 1983, in order to keep some order in the country, martial law was introduced, and we had to live under very restricted conditions. I wanted to mention two people who were very helpful at that time. First is Michelle Smythe from CSIR in Australia, and she responded to my letters, and she sent me letters with publications in English, and she also sent me parcels with coffee, tea, with toothpaste. Thank you, Michelle. That was very helpful. And the other person was Jim Howard. He also responded early to my correspondence, and he was sending me papers on coal petrology, on organic petrology those days. I will remember that forever, and we've been friends forever since then. Still, my English was slowly improving, but it wasn't fast enough for my taste. So I knew that in order to improve, in order to write and speak in English, I have to go somewhere. I have to leave Poland. I have to get immersed in the language, and this way to advance in my field. So I wrote a letter to Professor Duncan Murchison in Newcastle upon Tyne in my broken English, asking him maybe there would be a possibility, at least for a couple of weeks, to come and get immersed and also have a microscope and somebody with whom I can discuss organic petrology. Professor Murchison, that time he was Pro-Vice Chancellor at Newcastle upon Tyne University, and he responded and he said, Maria, I'm going to arrange British Council Fellowship for you to come. Wonderful. So that's what happened. So I ended up in Drummond Building. This is in Newcastle upon Tyne, when I spent 8 months studying organic petrology, having access to microscope, and improved my English. So at the end of my stay, I could write a paper in English. And also, this is a wonderful moment in my life. Professor Murchison opened the world for me. That was my first trip from outside the Soviet Union bloc, and it was amazing. So I went back to Poland with a lot of data towards my PhD, but I also went back with a confidence that I can be successful and that I'm not really worse than any other students outside Poland. So I got my confidence, and since then my life has been totally different. I also met a lot of students of organic geochemistry in Newcastle upon Tyne, and this is a picture from more or less those years. And some of you may recognize yourself there, but this is Jeff Abbott, Andy Bishop, Anne Raymond, and myself here. And so this was a wonderful time that gave me so many things and improved me on so many levels. So coming back to Poland, I had a plan. I wanted to finish my PhD as soon as possible. Again, I went back to Poland, to Wrocław University. I didn't have a lab, I didn't have a microscope there. So, but I did have already a lot of work done in Newcastle upon Tyne. So I turned to Professor Wiesław Gabsdil from Silesian University of Technology in Gliwice to be my advisor. He was a well-known organic petrographer in Poland, and I was able to go to Gliwice once a while to use his microscope, and him and his group, Bronia Hanak, Krystan Probiesz, and Marek Pozi, were very helpful. And it allowed me to complete the data for my PhD, and also Professor Barbara Kricińska those times was very helpful with that. So my PhD was on the positional conditions of coal beds in intrasudetic basin, and that was based on organic petrology, and that was based on sedimentology. And it was a good PhD, so I felt pretty comfortable in organic petrology by then, and I was pretty good at sedimentology. So my PhD was nominated to one of the best PhDs of that year of the Polish Ministry of Education Award. So it was good. So I had I got my PhD degree, and then, but for me, there was a major question at that point. What am I going to do next? I had a job at Wrocław University, but I didn't have a microscope. I didn't have a laboratory. I didn't have any chance of developing that at Wrocław University. So I thought, well, I probably need to go elsewhere to some other laboratory. So I started writing to people about postdocs, but I had negative responses. People didn't have money. And so I really was in a difficult point at that time, both scientifically and in general. This was 1988 to 1991. These were the years, and situation in my country was very difficult. After years of socialist government, people just had enough. People just say, we are not doing that anymore. So mass protests, a factory on strikes, we at universities and at strikes, protesters were met with armed forces of militia, and the times were difficult. That was the time, and soon after, Poland was in transition to different system. Economy was terrible, as you expect, and I just wanted to show you, I think this diagram is kind of interesting to show inflation in Poland over years. In 1988, that's the day, or that's the year that I was defending my PhD, inflation was 270%. And in 1989, we have inflation 585%. So what that means that I had a job at university, I was making millions of Polish zloty that were enough to probably cover food for a week or less, which didn't matter that much because we didn't have anything in the stores anyway. So situation was difficult. So at that point, with situation in that country and with my situation lab-wise and research-wise at the university, I felt defeated. And that was the moment that I thought I would give up on science. I came that close to resigning from the university, to giving up organic petrology, to giving up on science. A couple of days, probably more, and I would probably wouldn't be here today. And then the miracle happened. I got a letter from Professor Mark Bastin from the University of British Columbia in Canada. And he wrote, he said, Maria, I have some money on a project, not much, but if you are willing to come, and work with me, I'm going to do that. For me, the answer was obvious. That was Eureka. So my daughter and I, we packed bags and went to Vancouver, to University of British Columbia. Mark doesn't know that, but he saved my career as a scientist. And time in Vancouver, we spent 4 years in Vancouver. We're very successful. We were doing lots of innovative research. We published a lot. We, Mark and I, we think similarly about research and probably similarly about many things in life in general. And we did that time and we probably still do. So Mark, thank you very much for saving my career. And another important thing that happened in Vancouver, at the French class, I met my husband. So I spent 4 years in the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. And at that point, there was a position that they opened at Indiana Geological Survey and Wrocław University in Bloomington for a coal scientist. So I applied and I got the position. And since 1994, I spent my time in Bloomington. And this is one of the most beautiful campuses in the USA. You see those beautiful pictures from here, beautiful limestone architecture, and it just, I've enjoyed every single day since coming to Bloomington. So that was the kind of short tour through my life. And now we're just going to think a little bit about research in general and about organic petrology. First thing is in research, what's important is collaboration. Collaboration is a key to research success. And in my life, I've been very fortunate having a very stable team of many, many years working on projects, working on various issues. And I think this is very important to have a steady, a core group that works together, because what we can do, we can plan the research, we can write proposals together, we can plan the research, we can execute that, we can publish, and we can go from there, we can learn from there. So my main collaborators over years is a geochemist, Professor Simon Brasso and Arndt Schimmelmann. We've worked together for almost 30 years. We worked on projects together. We advised and co-advised students. And I think by this continuity of research, we produced a lot of good papers, a lot of good science. I learned a lot of organic geochemistry from them. And they taught me to the point when I go to organic geochemistry meetings, I can fake that I'm actually organic geochemist. So then my geologists and organic petrologists colleagues, Jim Hauer and Cortland Ebo from Kentucky, always ready to collaborate, always ready to help, always ready to get together and go for lunch, either in Bloomington, where I live, or in Lexington, where they live. Great friends. My physicist collaborators with whom I worked for many years on, especially on unconventional systems, where we deal with dynamics of gases, dynamics of fluids, and that's where their help as physicists is critical. So Andrzej Radliński, Tomasz Black, Yuri Mielniczenko, not longer with us, and Chris Clarkson from University of Calgary. Not longer with us, unfortunately. And my Indiana Geological Survey friends, They are not at the survey anymore, but we worked together for many years, Eric Qualley, John Rapp, and Agnieszka. All of them, my success is I owe them. My students, our students and postdocs, they are doing the hard work. They stay in the labs days and nights to collecting the data. So we owe our success to them. And for this slide and on the next slide, you will see many of them, but I had many more. And I did those who are not here, it's not because I value them less, but because I just didn't find their pictures. So a lot of international students, some American students, and they allowed me to be part of the research that I wouldn't have time to do otherwise, and I wouldn't have possibility. So thank you all for that. Next thing that I want to bring here is, to be relevant, our research needs to evolve in response to evolving needs. So as I mentioned, my early research was related mainly to coal. But then with times changing and societal needs changing, I started studying coal bed methane and then source rocks in the next stage. Even further, we looked into my research involved coal, and my source rock is my reservoir, so unconventional systems. And last several years, we are just moving also into biomass. And so it's very important to be flexible in research and evolve as the needs evolve. And it's especially important for us who work with students that we have to think ahead. We have to think what will be relevant in 5 years when our PhD students will finish, so that they are at the right place at the right time and somebody can offer them a job. And we also need to make sure that in our research we are driven by common sense and scientific and societal needs, but not other pressures. So thinking about this evolving science, I just looked at my publications over years, kind of briefly, and put this diagram together, how my research changed over years. So this is coal research, this is coal bed, this is shale research, CO2 storage, carbon dioxide storage, and biomass, and some other things. And this is, I did that by decades, before 1990, 1990, to 2000, 2000, 2010, and more recent to 2020. So you see that percentage-wise, the number of my publications on coal decreased. Coal bed methane just got into maximum around between 2000 and 2010, then went down. That's kind of a reflection of what was happening with coal bed methane industry in the States. I see a fluctuation in shales, and then carbon dioxide storage, we have increased. Biomass, I don't have anything, it didn't make it here because I finished at 2020. But between 2020 and now, we already have several publications on biomass. So this will pick up for the next decade. So the previous slide was on percentage-wise about my publications of, and this diagram is total publications by decade. So you can see that it's a growing trend. It's a nice trend. And I really think I like publishing papers. I really think that most efficient way to show value of our research is to publish, and to publish good quality papers. Because if they are not so good quality, will be like this scientist, struggling scientist here saying, please cite my papers. Now, a little bit organic petrology. I think there are some people on the call that don't know what organic petrology is. I just want to say that we organic petrologists, we study organic matter in rocks under microscope. So we look at pretty pictures like that. And based on the information we get from organic petrology studies, we reconstruct thermal histories of the rocks, and we also can predict hydrocarbon generation from various formations. So this is to say oil and gas. So that's what organic petrology is doing. And I say here that organic petrology is interesting and fun, but needs to be used in context. We need to remember that only in context, its significance it really shows. And because if we concentrate on organic petrology mainly, we have very specific terminology and terminology that is not so common. And people from other fields do not really understand or don't want to deal with that unless we explain in the bigger context. So obviously, organic geochemistry is a one field that we kind of combine data often. Sedimentology is another field. And recently, when we study energy storage, when we study cap rocks, physics of solid state and fluids is also important. So context is very important to show the significance of organic petrology. And I'm just going to show you a few slides here from my own research, how that is presenting itself. This is our paper from 2013, in which we discussed development of porosity in New Albany Shale and increase based on organic petrology and material science, gas adsorption, mercury intrusion, and also chemistry. And based on that, we interpreted the development of the porosity systems in terms of hydrocarbon generation phenomena. This is my highest citation paper, 780. Again, it reached large audience. Organic petrology was part of that. The paper reached large audience. Another one is kind of a review paper, but we put a lot of our own information there, written by my former student Dariusz Strompoch. That's from Annual Earth and Planetary Reviews. This is a combination. We talk about biogeochemistry of coal bed methane. We combine organic petrology with chemistry, with microbiology. Again, that's more than 400 citations. Another one, more recent one from 2018, that's about solid bitumen. It's kind of a review, but again, we put a lot of our recent information, again, combining geochemistry with petrography and with material science, with porosity. It's more than 200 citations already and relatively recent paper. And recently, we also work with quite a bit on changes in unconventional systems and in porosity systems, in utilizing physics techniques. And this is a relatively recent paper of deformation of pores in response to uniaxial stress in Marcellus Shale. It's from 2021. So again, looking at including organic matter study, including organic matter petrology, but by in context. We're coming close to the end here. So what are concerns about organic petrology? We all have the same concern who work in this field. Decline and disappearance of traditionally strong coal and organic petrology centers. Retirement of experienced organic petrographers and no replacement scheduled. Few students trained in organic petrology. These are obviously related issues. And limited funding for this type of research. For example, to buy a microscope, these are expensive microscopes that we work with. To buy a microscope requires a lot of money, and it's not there. What about the future of organic petrology? Future does not look bad in general, and looks very promising in countries like China or India. Organic petrographers should embrace other potential fields and applications, but I stress here, but we should not abandon the traditional ones. Shales and unconventional systems in general will need organic petrology data. There are major basins worldwide that will be explored. Combination with organic geochemistry is very important here. Incorporation of polynofacies to reconstruct the positional and climatic conditions is one of important directions for the future. And we still can learn a lot looking at coal Mastalerz with modern approaches and techniques. So whoever is in the position to continue research like that should do so. And we should always remember that there is life outside research. I love my research and I could do this work 24/7, but I like to do other things as well. We live in Bloomington, famous for music, so we attend concerts and operas very often. I like dancing, and this is my research assistant, LeBron, and dance instructor. I like dancing. I'm so bad at that, but I like it. And then mushroom hunting, I probably brought that in my genes from Eastern Poland. This is with my sister-in-law in Colorado. And I also like walking along the beach and looking at sunrise from our balcony in Florida. And support of my family is very important for researchers. We spend long hours working, so it's really good to have a steady family. And I had this fortune to have nice and steady family. My daughter was born when I was a university student. She grew up, she didn't cause too many problems. She grew up to be a medical doctor and a university professor at University of Colorado. And she got married, so I have a handsome son-in-law. And then I have a very loving and supportive husband, John Bryan. Here is our picture from almost 30 years ago. And I have my brother family, always reliable, always very supportive. So with all that, I have to say that organic petrology worked well for me. It provided me with opportunities. It gave me challenges. It gave me rewards and awards. And this is an example of one of those. And it was source of a lot of fun for me. And with that, I'm going to thank TSOP, and I thank you all for being part of my adventure. Thank you very much. And that's when I stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maria. Can we all, there's a little reactions bar at the bottom. I would really like to invite everyone to just use the little applause button there at the bottom to thank Maria for that wonderful talk. It's not often that you can get to use the words beautiful and heartfelt when you're listening to a talk by a scientist, but I felt that sort of, for me, describes your talk today. So it was wonderful. Thank you for sharing and for actually being vulnerable and talking about your past. You've had a long road and lots of lessons for many of us to learn. I'm going to ask, we don't have questions in the chat, but I'm sure I'd like to open the floor for anyone who does have a question that they'd like to ask. We could just, you could take yourself off mute and ask the question. There's one that's just coming from Simon George. What solutions can you think of for the lack of new organic petrologists being trained in many countries?
Yeah, it's important question. I don't know. I mean, organic petrology field is kind of shifting geographically. As I said, that we have still a lot of opportunities and a lot of people involved in that in China or India. So, but again, myself over years, I had a lot of Chinese students here training them in organic petrology. So I don't have a solution, but while we are still not retired, several of us, I think it's good idea that we put as much effort as possible in leaving footprint with regard to kind of organic petrology skills, and make sure that our students who go out to the world still can get as much from us as possible before we just totally leave the field. So I don't know. It's North America. There are not that many people who can teach organic petrology anymore. So probably we will have to rely in the future on trainings. There are still probably in Eastern Europe some, or in China, that we will rely more on trainings over there than trainings here in organic petrology. Well, I'm not done yet, so I still can train some before I say my final word. So that's what I can say now.
Thanks, Maria.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks, Maria. Simon, did you have a follow-up question? No? Thank you.
And
Thanks
nice
for that
to
question,
see you, Simon. Nice to see you on the Zoom.
Nice to see plenty of friends on the Zoom. That's good.
Yeah, actually, if we can, I'd like everyone to feel free to turn the videos on, because it is nice to see all the faces. We do have actually two more questions that have just come in, Maria. One from Eileen O'Donnell of An Amazing Life. And can you comment on whether you have concerns about the pollution caused by the use of coal and other fossil fuels, and possible solutions to that problem?
Well, in the States, it's a fact that we are using less and less coal. That's the fact. So our pollutions, when you look at pollutions from coal, decrease dramatically. And we see that, and that trend is going to continue because of natural gas and because of renewables. And that's where also political pressure is towards that direction. So it's going to decrease. I am, on the other hand, I am a kind of realist, how much we can expect. So I wouldn't like to have, these things cannot change overnight. We have to have plan B if we want to make some changes with plan A. And sometimes I am afraid that we will have unintended consequences of the actions that we take. So the trend of decreasing, at least those that are emitted from North American coal, those emissions will decrease. Well, with Asia, it's a different story. So, we kind of have to work together to think about the issue of pollution, but we have to be realistic, and we have to look at the bigger picture and look at the data rather than get our emotions run really high.
Excellent. Thank you for the response, Maria. And I totally agree. I think it's a bit short-sighted to, just say that we're going to switch over to a renewable and build a green future overnight, because fossil fuels is quite integrated into our society. So, it's a long road ahead. And I feel like in Australia, especially, we have significant pressure to divert away from fossil fuels, but at some points you still find a bit of, we still require that expertise. So definitely we don't want to lose it. Another question, based on the American education system, where do you think is the best way to get new students in organic petrology? I suppose that would be more like where would organic petrology be offered, I would assume, in relation to?
Yes, I mean, comparing to graduate school or maybe undergrad school, I mean, I have this idea that I think geochemistry and organic petrology should be taught as a certificate, maybe, or a minor or something like that. but I'm still trying to figure out what is the more logical based in the American system.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of coal geology, strictly speaking, there is not that much research going on in the United States. And but organic petrology in general, when we combine this with geochemistry, you know, and it's most of our geochemistry students here, they do some organic petrology with me. So we have to probably look in the context and at least put some elements of organic petrology together with geochemistry. And maybe that would be a better attraction if we, again, put that in context, if we expand the research a little bit. And with my colleagues, the geochemists here, that's what we've done for years, that our students, geochemistry and organic petrology, we look at this thing jointly. So I think it's a better way than just to concentrate on coal research. Again, in the States, we either coal petrologists, either they are already retired or close to retiring. And so that's, I just don't see that as a separate and kind of developing field as a separate field of academic teaching.
Excellent. Thank you, Maria. Anna, did you have a follow-up question, or is that okay? All good. Thank you. Joan has actually put in the comments here that, you know, there's still feedstock for petrochemicals, coke and steel, that we have not found replacements for when it comes to coal, and there's still a whole heap of research to be done in that space to eventually find replacements for those feedstocks. So there is one more question. What next in the future of coal research, and or I suppose what do you see as is the future of coal research globally, seeing this due to coal combustion? I think since coal combustion produces greenhouse gases, I would assume. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, you know, it's just mentioned before that the future coal research and coal application, it's in traditional sense, it's not going probably to develop like it was in the past, thinking about combustion or even gasification. One of the areas that we work on in the United States these days, we're looking at coal as a source of, for example, critical elements, as a source of rare earth elements. So that kind of may invigorate research into this, and especially organic petrology research, you know, and but also looking at the coal as a resource for something else that we didn't use before. So so we've already kind of worked on that for several years, and I see that at least for several years into the future. So that's one of the directions that is going to go. But in traditional sense, in coal research on coal combustion or gasification, maybe some more we can do more on coal liquefaction. But I think those other kind of non-traditional uses will have future.
Thank you, Maria. I absolutely agree. I think sometimes we forget about the wide range of applications where we can use organic petrology, and we sort of fixated only on the traditional uses, which, as you've shown through your career, our applications are evolving. As your career has evolved, moving from a conventional petrology to looking at source rocks and so forth. So we don't have any more questions in the chat. Would anyone like to come off mute and ask a question? Is there anyone There are some lovely thank yous in the chat, so I would encourage you to read those, Maria. But from my side, and also on behalf of TSOP Council, this was sort of a joint effort within the council to start this online series. So we are very, very grateful to Maria to open our series like this for the year. And I think it's the first one really that's been run by TSOP. It was a lovely talk, and it was wonderful to hear about your life. It was inspirational. I want to thank also Agnieszka for setting up the Zoom and sending reminders. And I want to thank Lei Zhao, our Vice President, who's also engaged Maria and invited her to do the talk. So, and to everybody on the call, regardless of your time, if it's a difficult time right now, I'm very sorry about that, but I'm so happy to have you on the call. Thank you for joining us. And again, just join me in thanking Maria for the lovely presentation that she's given us today. Please.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
thanks so
thank you
much,
very
Maria.
much, everybody. And I'm so happy that so many people signed in. And Michelle, special thanks for you.
Lovely. Thank you, everyone. I think the talk might be available. That Agnieszka will look into whether she can make that available for viewing later, but we will send an email if that's possible at some point, because it was being recorded. And lastly, yes, please look out for further emails for some online seminars during the course of the year. Thanks again, everyone. Have a lovely day, night, afternoon, wherever you are.
Thank you very much.